Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, June the 5th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's produced the program. We're looking forward to speaking with you this morning on a topic of your choosing. So, if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So, soccer season's here, albeit you probably can't see the other end of King George V if you're standing by the opposite net. But soccer season's here, and the Newfoundland and Labrador Soccer Association has unveiled a new campaign. It's the Kick It Up campaign, all in an effort to prepare the athletes for the upcoming Canada Games in 2025, the Summer Games, of course, in 2025. Trying to raise funds for new equipment and training opportunities, travel, knowledge, and let's hope the facilities are completed well in advance so that our local athletes can get a chance to familiarize themselves with their surroundings, get a chance to practice on the fields they're going to compete on. So good luck in this one. There's a big prize for their first fundraiser, which is already launched. It's a trip for two to the Paris Olympics this July. So just check them out at the NL Soccer Association Facebook and or website page if you don't want to get involved. And speaking of the Paris Olympics, Canada men's volleyball is already qualified for the Olympics, and now begins week 2 of the Nations League Men's Volleyball Championships. One of the premier events. It's an international competition. All the big teams are there. Yesterday, Canada, ranked number 10 in the world, played Cuba, number 9 in the world. The Canadians beat them in 4 sets. Tomorrow we've got Argentina, who are ranked number 8, so good showing so far, and hopefully they peak for the summer. Okay, so Major League Sports has got themselves in a bit of a quandary here. They've gone all in on betting. I mean, you've heard me say in the past, it's kind of frustrating and it's a bit much with all the betting ads that take place during the broadcast of one of the big professional sports. And of course, when the leagues are committed to the betting revenue dollars, now all of a sudden we're going to see more and more of these stories. It's happened in hockey, it's happened in baseball, and it's happened again in baseball with this story. Major League Baseball has banned San Diego Padres infielder Tucipita Marcano for life for betting on baseball. Right, 4 other players got a 1-year ban, but this is going to be the case. And it's going to be hard for the major leagues to justify their position on some of the betting issues. If you're not betting on your own team, how are they going to evaluate this? I saw an interesting tweet on social media yesterday, and it said something along these lines. It's going to be hard to explain why Pete Rose isn't in the Hall of Fame, with upcoming induction ceremonies being sponsored by DraftKings or FanDuel or Bet365 or whatever the case may be, but a Major League Baseball player gone for good. And talk about betting, albeit on a smaller scale. I've heard complaints in the past, charitable organizations or minor sports associations trying to apply for a lotto license, to have a 50-50 or some sort of raffle or whatever the case may be. There's supposed to be a 2-week turnaround. Of course, it's going to take longer if you apply by paper versus electronically. Minister Studley says they're right on the ball. They're meeting their 2-week turnaround. But they have made some adjustments that just make sense. So for those organizations that do it regularly, annually, you'll be able to get a 5-year license, which just makes sense. I mean, the tedious nature trying to fill out the applications, and some, of course, are submitted with incomplete information and or some errors, and that will jeopardize the 2-week turnaround time. So that makes sense that you can have one for 5 years. For organizations that hold an event on a regular basis, maybe not even annually, you can get a 2-year license. So I think that's helpful. All right, a couple of quick ones. So I think Dave is reaching out to someone at the Brain Injury Association, his Brain Injury Awareness Month, and I think it's probably a smooth move to call it brain injury because concussion is pretty innocuous, when in fact what it is a brain injury. It's also Recreation Month, but it's also Seniors Month. Yesterday we had a nice conversation with the seniors advocate, Susan Walsh, here on the show, and they've got a campaign going for social media as well. The concept of ageism is really very real. And it's one of the last socially acceptable prejudices. It just kind of happens subconsciously. We judge the book by its cover, and we see people who are up in ears and think that as a result they can't do whatever, when in fact that's primarily not the case. So what Ms. Walsh and her team are asking people to do is for either seniors themselves to submit, 60 words I think is the maximum, about what you're doing in your community, how you're giving back, what's going on in your life. And I think it would be also an additional add-on for folks who are younger, whether it be the grandchildren or son or daughter, to say, here's my nan, here's my pop, here's the senior in my life, and here's what they're accomplishing. So I just want to put that reminder out there. The deadline is the 14th of this month, so you know full well. So for some of you listening, there's someone you'd love to feature in this social media campaign, so please take the opportunity. On that front, the conversation also went to the concept of if you feel like you've been prejudiced because of your age, then it's the possibility to slump into loneliness or social isolation. And this is a problem. Just as a reminder, because there was a survey done of long-term care residents and their visitors about what the lockdowns or the visitor restrictions meant during the pandemic. And they were real, and they were really problematic. So they brought forward a bunch of recommendations like one visitor per patient or resident, and communal areas to be used so that people can socialize, because the harm that it's had on physical and mental well-being is very real. Now, luckily in this province, we did not see the amount of lives lost in long-term care, which was primarily in Ontario and Quebec. They were devastating stories in those provinces, but of course some of those facilities were privately owned and operated, and they did I almost cursed there, they did a terrible job. Again, just in the form of a reminder, what it means on the front of loneliness and or social isolation. I have a hard time saying that. Social isolation significantly increased the person's risk of premature death from all causes, a risk that might rival those of smoking, obesity, and physical activity. That's remarkable. Isolation was associated with a 50% increased risk of dementia. Poor social relationships, which are characterized by social isolation or loneliness, was associated with a 29% increase of heart disease and a 32% increase in the risk of stroke. It's associated with higher rates of depression, anxiety, suicide. Loneliness amongst heart failure patients was associated with nearly 4 times increased risk of death, 68% increased risk of hospitalization, and a 57% increased risk of emergency department visits. So this is so very real, and it's right in front of us. And you know the numbers regarding the aging demographic right here and right across the country. So at Seniors Month, please do put forward, as a senior yourself or a senior in your realm, your social circles or your family, let's get them recognized. All right, let's go downtown St. John's to the Energy NL conference. So apparently, it's the biggest one yet. I'm not 100% sure what that means, but of course, just about half of the day was dominated with conversation regarding hydrogen and the onshore wind plays. Also, the Premier, of course, addressed the delegates yesterday, and some interesting comments. I think nothing really new, but pretty much said, for all intents and purposes, that the province is all in on oil production. All in. Now, there is some hesitation about committing to equity stakes, for instance, if Beta Nord ever comes to pass. And the Premier, of course, will do what many in the industry are talking about, was the lower carbon footprint of our offshore oil versus, say, oil coming from the oil sands in Alberta. But pretty much saying that we're all in. He pointed to the fact that ExxonMobil is doing some interesting frontier exploration work this year. About $1.5 billion will be spent on exploration to the Persephone oil well, which may be sitting on some 3 billion barrels of oil. Also talking about some upgrades to be done at Hebron and Hibernia, but pretty bullish on oil. Now, I have no earthly idea when peak oil will happen or if it's happened. But at some point in the future, you hear the transition talks as much as I do. But the world does still need oil. At this moment in time, it's undeniably true. And how long that thirst will last, and whether peak is in 2030 or 40 or 50, I just don't know. I don't think anybody really knows, even though many people offer a date quite definitively. Who knows? But all in. And all in on hydrogen. Absolutely all in. Talking about our geographical location, our proximity to the market, whether it be the northeastern United States and or Europe. We know there are some pretty stern and stiff fines associated with European Union countries if they don't meet their targets regarding reduction of emissions. So the Premier, and this is not new either, is it? Because we've heard them talk about these opportunities, and whether it be the 12,000 potential jobs in rural Newfoundland, which is what he points to. I don't think we heard much in the way of the environmental concerns that were put forward, but on that front. Some of the protesters that were in place yesterday outside the convention center, primarily, again, to overuse that word, focus on World Energy GH2, not the other ones. And I've always thought aloud that that's the inclusion of John Risley, who people know in this province. Whether or not there's any baggage that he brings to the table that has caused this type of focus on his project or World Energy's project, a couple of things therein. So I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth because that's a terrible thing to be at. But one of the protesters pretty much said, move your project elsewhere. We don't want it on the Port-au-Port Peninsula. So I don't know if that's, purposeful in saying that not in my backyard, but okay somewhere else. Because moving the projects around, maybe some of the similar concerns will be voiced. And if you want to take it on this morning, we can do it. Minor update as it pertains to the Upper Churchill. Oh, before we get to that. So Representative Sean Leat from World Energy GH2, they're not really that close to making the final investment decision. Couple of reasons. We don't have the federal government regulations clearly understood, and he's talking about the work or the negotiations to secure contracts for purchase, and they're leaning on 10 years. So unless they can get a commitment of 10 years on the other end, Germany or wherever, they're not really that close, but they say they're still on their stated timelines of 2025, but those are some of those updates. And referring to the province as the energy capital of North America, and a lot of that has to do with the Upper Churchill. The Premier has stated pretty clearly over the years, over the months anyway, that unless there's a real redress and major benefits and a change in the way the contract is utilised and profited from by Hydro-Quebec, Province of Quebec and us, unless that deal is in the offing, then the province will walk away. But we do have a better hand of cards this time around than we've had in the past. You want to take it on? Let's go. And speaking about environmental concerns, we knew there had been a proposal in front of Cornerbrook City Council from Kruger and Cornerbrook Pulp and Paper looking for doing some cutting around the local watershed, and it's been rejected. So what they were asking for was 330 hectares of forest inside an 11,000 hectare protected lake area and a construction of a 2.75 kilometre access road. A couple of the councillors, including the mayor, voted in favour of, but it's been shot down by the council. And of course, one of the councillors said the obvious is that, protecting the watershed is where the buck stops for that particular council. So in the world of environment, this Cornerbrook Pulp and Paper denied, or proposal rejected. And we wonder, and fingers crossed, there's a long viable future for that operation. We know that industry is in trouble around the world, and they do indeed owe a significant amount of money, and hopefully that is also taken care of. Okay, let's keep going. I think we can all agree, regardless of what political stripe you have, is that the way that provincial and federal governments use consultants is too extensive. They just rely on them far too often. Now, a second set of eyes with specific expertise may indeed be required sometimes, but not as frequently as we seem to do it here, and absolutely not what we see in Ottawa. This story has been kicked around for a little while, but the Auditor General of Canada has released a report regarding consultants, and the key focus is on McKinsey & Co., which we've used in this province, right? It was at least $1 million contract to look at economic future for the province and some sort of roadmap. I don't know where that went, but the reliance on McKinsey is really problematic. 90% of the contracts that the Trudeau government awarded McKinsey were given without following the appropriate guidelines. And sometimes it was unclear what the purpose of the contract was or if the desired outcome was even achieved. The Canada Border Services Agency saw that McKinsey did not qualify for a contract. So what did they do? They revised the statement of work so McKinsey could qualify. So oftentimes the Trudeau Liberal government sole sourced contracts directly to McKinsey and never even tried to give us some sort of explanation as to why there was a non-competitive process, period. More numbers to consider. 70% of all contracts awarded to McKinsey were non-competitive. Worse, in 13 out of 17 contracts given to McKinsey where security clearances should have been necessary, the government allowed McKinsey to operate without them. How can that be? During most of these days where McKinsey was getting rich off of our tax dollars, it was led by a fella named Dominic Barton. And it's well understood that Mr. Barton is a friend of both the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. And he's also now Canada's ambassador to China. So this is a problem. Barton was behind recommending the creation of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which is where the fixed link is currently stagnating. But this is really a problem. And what can be done about this, I'm not so sure. But McKinsey & Co., all the non-competitive agreements, sole source agreements, not even sure what the intention was, what the outcomes were, and they've collected, what's the number here? Anyway, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. I can't find it. Oh, $209 million worth of contracts. $209 million in contracts from McKinsey. Must be nice. Sticking with some of the federal-related matters. And once again, the Auditor General, who does pretty good work here and up along. And for the Canadian Auditor General, of course, Karen Hogan. This is talking about the fact that we are ill-equipped or ill-prepared to combat cybercrime. Another scathing report. So looking at the RCMP, the Communications Security Agency, the Cyber Spy Agency, and the CRTC. Here's one of the quotes. We found that these organizations have neither the capacity nor the tools to effectively fight cybercrime. As cyber attacks grow in number and sophistication, part of the issue is the federal government's siloed and disconnected approach. So she says the breakdowns of response, coordination, tracking, and information sharing between and across the federal organizations. So apparently, it's a classic case of left hand, right hand, no idea what the other is doing. And then it's the disconnected flow of information. So you can make a complaint to the CRTC, and as opposed to the CRTC understanding your complaint and referring it off to the RCMP, apparently you're directed to do it yourself. So as opposed to all of these agencies being looped in on all the various files at the same time or concurrently, it's not happening. And as a result, in 2022, victims of fraud reported a total of $531 million in financial losses to the RCMP's Anti-Fraud Centre. And only 5 to 10% of these crimes are ever reported. So she goes on to say, without prompt action, financial and personal information losses will only grow as the volume of cybercrime and attacks continues to increase. I think cyber security should be part of actual defense spending, how we measure it. But apparently, the agencies we have in place are currently not up to the task. Whether that's just rectifying the inappropriate flow of information, don't know. You want to take it on? Let's go. A couple of very quick ones. This one should be the big story in the country. And notably, yesterday in the House of Commons, just during question period, very little attention given to it. And this one, folks, is a problem. Sometimes people throw around words like treason. Just because you didn't like what one member of Parliament did and or the Prime Minister, if you didn't like it, then all of a sudden it was treasonous. And oftentimes when that's flicked around, it holds no weight or water. But in this case, maybe so. Okay, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, which we will continue to refer to as NSICOP, just easier to say. So they released a report that says that there was members of Parliament, unnamed, and no actual number, members of Parliament were wittingly, willfully sharing information with foreign bad actors and the information not in the best interest of this country. So we've gone from foreign interference into the elections to actual domestic collaboration with some of these people. And the government has gone on further to say they're not going to release the names. There better be law enforcement, police investigations into every single one of these people who have allegedly done what they are accused of doing. Imagine sharing information, actively working with foreign actors, which some legal scholars and people who know more about it than I do are using the word treason. And it's hard to deny the appropriate application of that word when it comes to this. This is amazing stuff. So they looked at files from the RCMP, CSIS, the Department of Justice, Elections Canada, and they say quite clearly that they fail in their duty to conduct themselves in the best interest of the company. They were communicating directly with foreign missions ahead of political campaigns, accepted money from foreign governments or their proxies. The privileged information on the work or opinions of fellow parliamentarians, knowing that the information could be used to manipulate some other MPs and senators, that the report said. I mean, this is bigger than just knowing that the Chinese and the Russians or the Iranians or the North Koreans are trying to meddle and get involved in our elections. And of course, the public inquiry into that meddling has said it didn't have any impact on the outcome. But if actual members of Parliament are doing what they're accused of doing in this report from NSICOP, this is bigger than knowing that the Chinese are lurking around every corner and try to influence their diaspora who would live in Canada to get involved in nomination processes or whatever the case may be. Amazing stuff. A couple of very quick ones. Travel has become unreliable and a bit of a nuisance. We're treated like cattle. It's only going to get worse. WestJet has announced this change to their fare. As of yesterday, what they call their basic fare is being replaced by the ultra basic fare, and it is ultra basic to say the very least. Carry-on bags not permitted unless you're traveling on a transatlantic or trans-Pacific flight, or if you purchase extended comfort for all the flights in a single direction. If you can bring something on board that can fit under the seat, you can do that. You'll be pre-assigned seats. Automatically be assigned seats at the back of the aircraft, including the middle seats. You're not guaranteed to be together when traveling with others. If you prefer to pre-select a seat, you have the option to choose your seats for an additional fee. Boarding, you'll be the last to board. You're not eligible for any changes. You can't change, you can't cancel, there'll be no refunds, and they're not permitted with that particular fare. So, in addition to that, no WestJet rewards. Opting for this fare means you'll miss out on earning WestJet dollars and their tier qualifying spend. So, travel was once glamorous, and now this, it'll be attractive as a price point, but can't bring a carry-on. You're going to be boarding last. You might not be sitting with those you're traveling with. You get no rewards points, nothing. Ultra basic, which is ultra garbage. Anyway, I thought that one was of interest. And on September the 9th of 2021, we were told by Carl Diamond and the Diamond Group of companies of all the lofty promises for improvements and bringing commercial traffic back to the Stephenville Airport. The manufacturing of cargo, drones, and the whopping big investment and the hundreds or the thousands of jobs to be created. 1,000 days later, which is today, 1,000 days since that announcement, little to nothing has happened. And we're all keeping an eye on the Bank of Canada today to make an announcement on their interest rates. The consensus is to expect the first cut in 4 years. There's been at least 10 consecutive hikes to the benchmark overnight lending rate. But let's see what the Bank of Canada has to say today. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. We're talking about school buses, Seniors Month, and whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Tom. You're on the air.
Good morning, sir. How are you this morning?
Very well, thank you. How about you?
I'm horrible. I'm peed off. I'm upset, and I'm frustrated. And as I said to Dave, I don't know. I'm at wit's end with respect to cars passing school buses. I just don't know what to do. Again, this morning, I'm standing there with my son, 9-year-old son, and my neighbor's little girl. And the bus is there, the lights flashing. This guy comes along. I'm in the front of the bus with my hand up at the guy. He looks at me, slows down, and keeps on going. 3 weeks ago, I bought a dash cam as I was writing letters to the RNC saying, this is the circumstances, this is what's happening, this is the driver, this is the vehicle, this is the license plate, please action it. 2 weeks ago, this happened again. I sent a letter to the RNC, and I said, guys, this is full description. I have the dash cam. Nothing. It's the same as if I were to write God himself. I'd get a better, quicker response. Nothing. Now, again this morning, same thing again. Now, I know it was a big issue in the news there a few weeks ago with another area of the town where the ladies there were seeing the same thing. There's an epidemic of people who simply do not care. It's going to take, unfortunately, a child getting hit by one of these maniacs. And I'm going to be the first person there encouraging the family to sue the RNC because they're being complicit in this. They're not doing anything. I can't understand for the life of me when I write a letter to the RNC with full descriptions, here's a dash cam showing everything, they just don't respond. What does it take? Here's the license number. They have access to the details of the person who owns the vehicle. Send the bloody ticket. It's not their job to decide who's guilty or innocent. It's the judge's decision. Subpoena me, and I'll go to court with my dash cam. I know I'm sounding frustrated and I'm peed off here this morning, Patty, but it's just I'm at my wit's end to have to deal with this issue. Other than to put like we did in the military during exercises, put a strip in front of the bus when I see the bus coming, so that anybody that drives over it will get all their tires punctured to get them to stop. That's how frustrated I am with this whole situation.
I don't even understand the mindset of being willing to pass a school bus with the stop sign and the lights deployed, and you have to stop regardless of which direction you're traveling. But people just don't, or some are just completely oblivious. And you're right, it's going to take something tragic possibly for people to stop doing this. I think there are some moves coming. Now, the fine for illegally passing a school bus is anywhere from $500 to $1,200. So maybe if we were reporting those types of fines being levied by the RNC, then that might give people pause for concern and pause for stopping. In addition to that, when Minister Stully is talking about these new speed cameras, some 10 of which will be put in different spots around the northeast Avalon, she's also talking about red light cameras and cameras on stop signs on school buses. And I think that's an excellent idea, because let's go to the tape. If you're caught doing it, let's make sure that you get the bill, you get the ticket in the mail, and it's at the maximum, and it's $1,200, because something has to give here.
Well, that's true. But again, we get the issue down again, where when they did away with the front plates, that was a concern, especially for school buses, because the vehicles are approaching the bus, and of course they can't see the plate, and they got to look in the mirror, and it's backwards. So that's a concern. But an even bigger concern for people such as myself who are trying to capture these people is the fact, and it was addressed in the news yesterday as a result of these speed cameras, is the washed out license plate.
Yep.
Now, I wrote the minister a year ago, and to his credit, he responded. And of course, he set the party line to me by saying the RNC is an independent agency and we can't do nothing, make a complaint to the Police Complaints Commission, because I was driving my wife to work at the Drainway one morning. Clearly a drunk driver in front of me. I called 911, got on the line with a police officer. He said, "Can I have the license plate number?" I said, "No, because it's washed out." Then he made this stupid comment, "Well, can you get a bit closer?" I said, "You out of your mind? I'm not driving closer to a drunk driver." "Well, can you see who's driving?" "No, because the windows are darkened." So I said, that's the issue we're faced with here. And now here we go once again with the RNC saying, "Hey, guys, you're supposed to be going to RNC." Come out with a directive saying, "Guys, you got 30 days to get to motor vehicle registration and get a new plate, or everybody's ticket is $500. That'll frighten the heck out of everybody, because you see people swimming past. I've seen people go past the school bus several times, and I can't see the license plate number. And this has been going on now for what, years this has been happening. So it all comes down, again, it's got to come down to the RNC. What's the good of having laws if we're not enforcing them?
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Now, it would be an unfortunate use of time if the RNC is going to spend the next 2 months pulling over everyone with the peeled off license plate, illegible license plate, or a little piece of plexiglass over. But something has to give. I like your idea about just making a declaration. People have, just pick a number, 30 days, 45 days from today to get that rectified, because all you have to do is bring in your old plate. They will give you a brand new plate free of charge. So unless we do something like that, then we're going to have this impact that you describe, and with the speed cameras, because last year 86% of the vehicles that were flagged by the speed cameras, you could read the plate, but that left 14% where you couldn't. And you know full well, people listening this morning that know that they have one of these plates that can't be read, they're not going to be quick to want to change them, because that means they will not be in any jeopardy of getting caught by speed cameras. So I think your idea is spot on. You got 30 days. Get it done.
Yeah. Because you hit the nail on the head. I was speaking to somebody when this thing was coming out the other day, and they said, "Well, you watch the people now; they're going to be washing out their own plates, because they're going to say, well, they won't be able to tell who I am anyway, because and they'll think it's normal." And there are people out there going to be like that.
Of course.
So and I know it's going to be time consuming, and I know the RNC probably don't have the time to go around and pull everybody over. But they got to start making some examples of people and say, like they do now when we have these special weekends, and they say, well, we picked up 45 people this weekend, 6 for drunk driving, 7 for no license, 16 that were unregistered. Let's get starting these things. We picked up 42 people today that didn't have their plates changed. So that we know at least they're doing something. I could be spouting complete BS here by saying the RNC aren't actioning these school bus tickets. Because perhaps they are. Perhaps they're doing a lot of things that I don't know about. But from my perspective, from where I'm sitting and the complaints I'm making, my complaints aren't being actioned. So clearly the people, those ladies that I mentioned when I was talking earlier, clearly they're frustrated just as well as I am. So if they're doing something, tell us. And if they're not doing something, tell us. But at least say something that'll give me some peace of mind, so that if I were to not be there some morning when I drop my child off, that he's not going to get hit by some idiot passing a big yellow school bus with lights flashing. I'm sorry to have rant this morning to you.
It's all right.
Your show,
I'm used to it.
I'm frustrated.
This is right from the RNC. Owner-operator responsibility to replace illegible, dirty, etc. plates. Tickets issued this week for this infraction, so it is being enforced. So they have written tickets for exactly that. And let's see if we can't get a summary weekly from them, so we can put it in the news and say, just give people fair warning. So something along those lines might be, I think, helpful, because it will come down to a case of folks playing by the rules and possibly getting dinged for speeding versus people who are willfully not playing by the rules to avoid getting dinged for speeding and or passing a school bus or whatever the case may be. Tom, appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
Thank you for listening to my rant. Have a good day.
You too, buddy. All the best. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
All right. What do you make of that? Because something does have to give, right? Tom's right. People are going to do what they can to scrape the paint off of the letters and numbers on their license plate, knowing that the speed cameras are coming and the fines will be pretty stern. Let's take a break. I want to go back. Wilfred's in the queue to talk about Seniors Month. Don't go away. Welcome back. A couple of interesting ideas. So, number one is, are people even going to pay the fines? We know there's some $50 million in outstanding fines. That's not all highway traffic stuff. Some is contraband tobacco or whatever the case may be, which is why we need the Justice Department to very quickly bring this community service for outstanding fines program into play. And an excellent idea from a listener, just sent an email during the break, is as opposed to the RNC having to spend time pulling people over alongside the road, maybe, just maybe, sending up some RNC officers to some of the major parking lots at the mall and Costco, whatnot, make their way through the parking lots. We've got a captive audience right there, and if you see whatever studded tires or these illegible plates, write them a ticket. It's breaking the law. I mean, they'll do it if you're parked in a no parking zone or if you're parked in a blue zone, so that's a good idea. All right, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number one. Wilfred, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Paddy. Wilfred Bartlett calling from CBS.
Welcome to the show.
Before I get into my topic, I want to send condolences to Roger Jameson, who died at a very young age, and I happened to run across Roger a few times in my lifetime, and he did a lot for this province. And the sad part about it now, I was thinking about last night, there's not very many people left now that's doing the work that this province needs.
I was always really impressed with Roger Jameson, and as I mentioned yesterday, and I think this is a bit outside of his work with the tourism industry, Marble Mountain and the like, but he was so willing to be a public advocate on those fronts, and I mean, his birthmark was disfiguring, but he learned to live with it. I mean, how many people do we know who, if they have, whether it be that or a goiter or broken teeth or whatever the case may be, they're loath to be in public, but he was brave and he was smart. That's one thing I always thought about when I spoke with Roger Jameson. He was as sharp as a whip.
Yeah, well, you had Susan Walsh on yesterday, Paddy, and listeners, I got a lot of respect for that woman for what she's doing for the seniors. And she mentioned doing the seniors, but I always forgot about it, but it's okay because it goes right into my topic. She said we should celebrate seniors for all they've done for this province, and many in their 80s and 90s still doing it, and I've been saying that for years. And so no one knows any better than I do. At 88, I'm still doing it. I always said, once you give up doing things you like, you die. And I guess that's why I'm still punching in it. At present, I'm a member of the Seniors Advisory Committee for the town of CBS, and I'm well qualified for the job because of my age and my ability to express my opinions, and I'm still doing it for the seniors. Also, I was listening to the TV these last few days now about D-Day and the Second World War, and it brings back a lot of memories, sad memories for me, because I had a stepdad and two uncles who served in the war. And I can't imagine they went through. I mean, the hell they went through. And one of them said to my uncle, gave his life so I could have freedom of expression and opinions. And I all enough remember the day it ended. I've never forgotten. One of the reasons why is the first time I ever fired a gun, because everybody, when news come around, was firing the guns around the communities. And grandfather wrote out the gun, I pulled the trigger. Very memorable thing. Anyway, I moved to CBS a few years ago after I had a massive heart attack, and I couldn't do much for activities, couldn't do no cards or nine anymore after that, and I found that I could get out to 8 or 10 games, cards, and then darts another week. It was a wonderful place to be. Now I'm down to 4 a week. Any organization's only good as the people in charge. Some people get involved with organizations to make it better. Some do it for their own personal agenda, and certainly ends up in a lot of communities. Today, I want to talk about organizations that were created to serve seniors who are lonely, isolated, and want something to do to make their last few years a bit more enjoyable. The 3 organizations I will talk about today have lost their way and have done the complete opposite of throwing their bylaws out the window. One is Worsley Park 50 Plus Club, the Federation, which I mentioned last week, and Paradise Adventure 50 Plus Club. Today, I'm going to explain what happened last week. I became involved with Worsley Park 50 Plus Club a few years ago on the board for a while, and on May the 4th, 2022, Worsley Park held a selection of officers, 44 members present. Elaine Hutchins, the Avalon director for the 50 Plus Federation, was present. I nominated Jerry Ware for president, but promised I would run for election as vice president. I was trained by Moore University self-committees to do up constitution and bylaws, and have been involved in them for 48 years. I got pride on board with a lot of knowledge. On May the 4th, I was elected vice president by the Worsley Park 50 Plus Club membership. I found out I had made a terrible mistake. Geraldine Ware was elected president. She was a person who wanted to do things her own way, knew nothing about procedures and bylaws, and wouldn't listen to anyone. A one-person show. The sad part is I was her friend, campaigned for her, and she would have not won without my vote, because the first vote was a tie. On January 11, 8 months later, at a board meeting of the Avalon director, with Elaine Hutchins present, I was removed from the board as vice president, which was illegal. Members elect the board and can only be removed by its members. I was not present at the meeting because I was sick. Later on the same day of the card game, it was announced by President Jerry Ware, with Elaine Hutchins had decided as the treasurer had resigned, and right after blue that the board 6 people had removed me from the position of vice president, without any explanation of what I had done or why the treasurer had resigned. The board got away with it because the president of Elaine Hutchins. The people there I thought was okay, I guess, because Elaine Hutchins was there from the Federation. Anyway, I did return to the club a little bit later and asked permission to speak to the membership, and Jerry Ware refused me the right to speak. When I asked her why, she said, I am the president, and Elaine Hutchins told me I'm the boss. And then she had my back, and also President Robert Rogers from the National Federation has her back. And so far, neither Robert Rogers or Elaine have denied that. She wouldn't allow me to speak and wouldn't provide with the minutes of the meeting where I was fired. It all started with Geraldine Ware, president of Worsley Park 50 Plus Club, and Elaine Hutchins, Avalon director with the 50 Plus Federation, who stuck her nose in something that was none of her business. I can remember a year earlier in Marystown, at an AGM meeting after Federation, a person asked a question about something with the clubs. Elaine Hutchins replied, "You do what is in your constitution and bylaws." Here's Elaine came to Worsley Park and advised the board to do the complete opposite.
So, Wilfred, can you just give me an idea of specifically what the issue is that was handled poorly as opposed to the personal grievances, what have you? So what happened that was not supposed to be allowed by the constitution bylaws?
Well, the members elect the board, and the board, and certainly that's the ones who decide if anybody gets fired or whatever, right? I was fired, whether to do one, he didn't know anything about it, wasn't aware. I'm vice president on the board, and I wasn't aware of that meeting that day that Elaine Hutchins was going to be there, what she going to be there for. She called her by the president without letting the rest of us know. And I was sick, I didn't attend it, but it went in for a card game that evening, that's what I was told. Now, I tried everything to get that straightened out. The first thing I did, I talked to Elaine Hutchins at the meeting. I said, look, there's the Constitution, your Constitution 50 plus, that states that can't be done. Oh, she said, that Constitution no good anymore, it's out. And anyhow, the next day, I sent a letter to Elaine Hutchins, Avalon director, brief fiscal, the Worsley Park 50 plus track were you responsible for the fire of me as vice president of Worsley Park 50 plus club for no cause. On May the 4th, I was elected by the group, and I made 11 on vice from you, voted out by 6 people on the committee. I am preparing a press release, and I need some items for pertaining to Newfoundland Labrador 50 Plus Federation. I have in my possession the constitutional bylaws from January 13, which you stated were no longer any good. The others, those I took work for the club to the best of my ability, which you stated was wrong. I sent a letter to her wanting that information. Up to this day, which is a year and a half later, I have not received anything but laying answers. 5 days later, I sent a 3-page letter to Robert Rogers asking for help. Never did get a reply. On January the 20th, I sent it to Linda Holford, Vice President of 50 Plus Federation. That's 3. And anyhow, what I got from Linda Holford is, hi, been busy with family this week, and I will chat with both Robert and Elaine sometime this coming week and get back to you, to Linda. She gets back 5 days later. Hi, Wilford, thanks for taking the time. Let me know your concerns, but any action in an instance such as this is sole responsibility of your director. This is to have you. I am suggesting you continue. Sorry I cannot be any help as first vice president. Not my place to get in the middle of it. Apparently no one wanted to get in the middle of it. And
okay, and so take us to the end of the story before I have to go to the break.
Well, the problem is I kept on going, writing letters to the editor and to all the club members and everything else. And nobody would answer. Nobody would deal with it and everything else. You know, this is the problem. And anyway, I went to the last year. I sent a letter to him that if this was not resolved, I would go to the convention last year and bring it up. And so the minute I walked in, everyone was expecting me. And on the agenda was concerns of clubs, right? If there's a problem with concerns of clubs, you bring it up on the agenda for discussion. Robert Rogers, in the morning, before the convention opened up, got up and made a statement that only people with voting delegate schools, and he told 200 people that they couldn't get up and make a statement about any concerns clubs, so it never got done. Now, anyway, I sent off a letter. And I did get a reply from one last year. Lloyd Dalton, he was on the board of directors of the Federation. He said, "Thank you for your email and attached attachments. The 50 Plus Federation is an organization dedicated to friendship and helping any members club with advice which they may or may not pay heed, as well to help clubs find a way through some difficulties presented from outside forces. The board tries not to get involved in issues. These comments are my own, but I expect a board representative will officially respond to you by this position to this matter after our meeting." Now, that's from one of the board members. I never heard that else, so I figured that then that they weren't going to do nothing. After I came back from the Federation, I went to, I was playing cards into Paradise. And in there, I got removed from that club in there for the same reason. But and then I put out a letter.
Okay.
About trouble in Paradise, right? And this is what I guess. For 3 members came back. Noreen Crean with the 50 Plus Federation. She said, "All right, board members." Now she sent a letter to me and all the members out of board. "All right, board members, there's a piece of correspondence from Mr. Bartlett. Our executive needs to acknowledge receipt of Mr. Bartlett's correspondence to us. No answer is not an answer." Amy Farrell came back. "I agree, Noreen. This needs to be discussed at our April meeting."
Yeah, and all of these names, people don't know who exactly we're talking about, very likely. And it is it's 9:50, so I'll give you another 30 seconds because I do have to go, Wilfred.
These are what is a very, very important thing if you're talking about our seniors of this province. This needs to be fixed because not only me, there's all the rest of the people is doing it. I also got a letter from Lorna Warford. Now, 3 members on the board of directors of 50 Club Federation. "Good morning, executive board members. This issue is not going away anytime soon. I don't think any one of us has the answer, but we can't put this debate until every stone is overturned.
Okay.
And we can all agree to a solution. I fear this man is blow over up at the convention than that before." Now,
okay.
They went to the board
We're
meeting.
going to have to leave it there, Wilfred. And look, if it's broken, it needs to be fixed. And I don't mean to cut you off, but it is 9:50 and Dave is flagging me out here to the break, so I do have to get going.
Paddy, the thing is now, I've been removed. They're two of the biggest 50-plus clubs in there. They're not allowed to play cards. And nobody's given me a reason as to why. It's all because it started by Lane Hutchins and Jerry Ware from the beginning. And all that is, and it's coming out to all the rest of the members around now.
I appreciate the information, Wilfred, and I appreciate your call. Hello?
Yes.
I'm just trying to say goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye, Paddy.
Thanks, Wilfred. All the best. Anyway, let's take a break. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to a marine biologist with Oceania Canada. That's Jack Daly. Jack, you're on the air.
Hey, Paddy. How are you doing today?
Doing okay. Thanks. How about you?
Very well. And just calling in about just to give an update on the capelin fishery that we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so the announcement is for just over 14,500 tons, right?
Yep, yeah, and that's the same quota that we've had since 2021.
Yep.
And prior to that, it was just a little bit higher. So no change in management, even though we have seen changes in science, public opinion. So, yeah, a pretty disappointing decision from our point of view over here at Oceania Canada. And it really, kind of spells some uncertainty about the next decision, which will be northern cod. So, we had the redfish decision last Friday. We had capelin yesterday. So it seems like the office of the minister is really dropping all these decisions quite quickly. And I know there's a lot of consternation around, various issues regarding these fisheries, but it just speaks to kind of, yet again, a year-to-year kind of crisis management cycle that we're stuck in and lacking a real long-term vision for any of these fisheries.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of different species. So northern cod, there's pleas out there, whether it be from one processor himself and or the union, to move back towards a commercial fishery. Even George Rose, noted scientist who's now working in BC, was a long time here at Memorial University, talking about the fact that, historical migration patterns means that we might see a commercial fishery for northern cod in years to come. Very much the direct opposite of the Gulf cod stock, which is absolutely decimated, on the verge of extinction. Not my words. Redfish, we were floating around 25,000 metric tons. Then lo and behold, when the quota is announced, the TAC is announced, it's 60,000 tons. So I'm not sure what changed therein. But the capelin decision, last time you were on, of course, people who get the anecdotal evidence, they're on the water themselves, they think that there's more capelin around than the science says. So the blend between scientific data through the sentinel fishery and catch rates and anecdotal evidence, it all makes for a bit of a mishmash.
Yeah, definitely. But, what we do have, besides the anecdotal evidence, is, a strong science survey and then also strong citizen science survey that observes beaches, year after year. And really, we're not seeing a change in, how this stock is managed. And just going to cod quickly, one of the main reasons we had hope that maybe the department would set some type of vision for capelin. So, regardless of the quota decision, we kind of need something to, look ahead, let's say even 2 or 3 years. And in the latest cod assessment, the number one reason that they suggested that cod may stay the same or even decline next year is because of a lack of capelin. You mentioned Dr. George Rose's research, which is really exciting, which shows that cod is returning to that historical migration pattern. Part of the reason they're doing that is because they're following capelin. And so when we have both of these stocks predicted to either stagnate or decline next year, kind of continued exploitation at these levels. And, just to remind listeners, 15,000 tons, that's the second largest forage fishery quota that we have in this country. It is quite significant. And again, it's not just taking fish out of the water, it's actually taking the next generation out too. So although we are upset with this decision, we are looking towards next steps. The department has committed to establishing, kind of the modern management practices for forage fish by the end of this year. So that includes, reference points, targets, actual planning. And then we're also looking forward to the implementation of a new monitoring policy for this fishery amid some reports of, dumping here and there. So although this decision kind of we're really looking towards and pushing the DFO Newfoundland and Labrador region to start making a plan for this stock that extends from the year-to-year management, because that really isn't serving anyone well.
As a scientist, I'll ask you this question because, the thoughts surrounding cod in particular about the potential for a commercial fishery, and, yes, it would be about historic migration patterns, what have you, but when DFO changed their modelling and they're using data from not 1983, which was once the case, now all the way back to 1954, which has taken northern cod out of the critical zone. But they go on to say it hasn't put any more fish in the water. So how do you think lay people like myself should look at this new model? Because it might change the label we attach to species, but it hasn't added any spawning biomass. So should I consider the change?
Yeah, well, not only how should you consider it, but how should DFO managers consider it? I think there's a real lack of understanding. The LRP, that limit reference point that we're talking about, that has been lowered, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. What the limit reference point shows is that below this level, the stock is really in a critical state that it really cannot rebuild. So having the model, extended back in the time series, having these new connections that they made in the model between how cod interacts with juvenile cod is exciting, and it gives us a little bit of breath, or some breathing room, because we know that we're not in that state. But what we don't know is, what the future holds, because, we've seen this stock kind of stagnate since 2017, as we have seen the Capelin stock. When we talk to DFO managers, before, when cod was critical, they weren't really changing management. Now that it's cautious, it's really unclear of what we're doing there. And what is different than in other DFO regions, there's actually really clear rules for each zone. So let's say it's a stock's in the critical zone. Some regions will allow it to be fished, at a certain amount. Some regions will close it. When it's in the cautious zone, then they can increase the quota incrementally. And then when it's in the healthy zone, that's kind of when the economic considerations take over. What we lack in DFO Newfoundland region are these basic kind of tools. And so that's what we're really pushing for. Again, we are hopeful that cod, can rebuild. We think that it can, but only if we give it that chance. And again, using those modern management tools. And also, I would be remiss to say, often scientists, particularly myself, can get really hung up on the quota. But what we often miss is that there are tons of other management measures. So, about timing, about seasonality. When we look at capelin, this fishery theoretically could be sustainable if we didn't just harvest the eggs, if we harvested it after the fact or something along that route. So we also have to consider those other management measures that we have at our hands. And on cod, it's also very complicated, as you know, because there's the question of the food fishery, of which some kind of in the big fishing industry don't support, but is incredibly important to local heritage. So, as you know, and as everybody listening, fisheries are extremely complicated. And what we're really asking for is maybe have the department and the fishing industry take a step back and just try to say, where do we want to be in 5 years? Because we just continue for every spring. It's just like a bonanza every spring of crisis. And I think it's time that people should expect a bit more from our federal government, which is, again, highly resourced to manage these fisheries, and should be doing it in a way that is thinking in a little bit in the longer term.
Fair ball. Jack, I appreciate your time this morning. And this has nothing to do with anything, but one of my youngest son is named Jack Daly. Appreciate your time.
Crazy.
Thanks for the call, Jack.
Thanks so much, Patty.
Take care.
Have a great day.
You
Bye-bye.
Too. Bye-bye. Jack Daly, marine biologist with Oceana Canada. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're talking about fishery changes in Nunavut, and what we've seen is some of the communal license being now shared with the private sector for the offshore, and Bill's a school bus driver, and then whatever you want to talk about right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 4. Good morning, Bill. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you doing, sir?
Great today. Thanks. How about you?
Not bad, my friend. My first time calling you, Patty.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, my friend. I'm calling about you had a caller back, maybe 4 calls back, about school bus driving and that?
Yep.
I'm a school bus driver, sir. I won't tell you how long I've been driving, but the kids I'm driving today, I drove their parents.
Okay, there you go.
There you go. And I pretty well seen it all. I average, I say, 3 a year that go on through the stop signs. I've had a parent almost picked off. I had a kid almost picked off over the years. You got to be very careful when you're driving that bus. If you're going to haul them flares on, you got to make sure that you have time for the cars up ahead of you to stop. Now, Patty, in a lot of cases, when they know you're going to be pulling them over, they'll put her to the floor. So there's a lot of things that you have to watch, Patty, when you're driving a bus.
Of course. I mean, you got the responsibility, the weight of the world on your shoulders with our children in the back of the bus. So if you've been driving for all these years, is the issue getting worse?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because RCMP are like hen's teeth where I'm driving. You'll never see one. And I think what drivers are doing, what people are doing, I could be wrong. They're leaving too late for work. Then they're putting them to the floor. They see a bus going to stop to pick up a couple of kids. They'll make sure she goes to the floor. No, you got to put people up there. They understand what you're doing. They'll stop probably 1,000 feet up ahead of you because they know what you're going to do. But they're out there, my buddy. They're very dangerous, Patty.
You know, whether it's they left too late or whatever the case may be, everyone's just in a mad rush. And I'm not sure what part of the province you're calling from, but here in the city itself, it's kind of madness. It really, truly is, because nobody's getting anywhere in a hurry. People could be zipping in and out of lanes and flying down the road, and I'll just see them at the next red light. And that's pretty much what happens all the time. Even if you get lucky and you get through a light before I do, I'll see you at the next one. So I don't know what we're going to have to do, but the amount of reckless driving and aggressive driving, distracted driving, and people willing to pass a school bus or zip or fly down through a school zone period is just out there in droves.
Oh, it's unreal, Patty. Like, it's got a lot worse and a lot worse. The school boards or the schools never come and ask drivers. At least they never have asked me. Any ideas what we could do to make things a little easier, a little better to protect the kids? It's like, I'll go this way. When I used to be a janitor many years ago, you weren't treated too good because you were a janitor. And I believe, especially contract drivers, are treated pretty well the same way. Not by the contractors, but they don't look at them as, an essential person for that school.
So let's say you have their ear right now and you want to be consulted about what can make things safer for the children. Where do we start?
Well, my friend, first of all, they've got too many kids on a bus. Let me explain it to you. Now, they say you can sit 2 in a seat. Okay. Let's say your bus can take 20 kids, and you've got 20 kids. Now, if they're all teenagers or big kids, they're screeching, they're carrying on, you're driving, you're trying to be safe. If you were driving, Patty, with your 2 or 3 kids in the back of your car, would they be screeching and bawling and pounding each other's on the head and all that? The driver has to keep control and watch that road. And it's hard to do when you've got kids getting on like that and there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the solution there is, whether it be a human, a student assistant or something on the bus to be in charge of enforcing some good behavior in the back of the bus and or cameras or whatever the case may be, because you're right. Your responsibility is to navigate the roadway safely. It shouldn't be about trying to monitor what goes on in the back of the bus. I know you do to the best of your ability, but it's hard to split the focus.
Yes, sir. And all I'm worried about, it won't be me because I'm putting in my last year this year. It won't be me. I'm going to miss it because I miss the kids. I love the kids. When you got your kids gone all them years and you get to see kids every day and it's, hello, Bill, how you doing, Bill? And, It's nice.
Oh,
yeah,
sure. Of course it is.
Yeah, I'll miss it. But I pity the poor driver that something happens to a kid crossing that road. The buses should be allowed, if it's a 2-lane road, 1 each way, pull out in that middle of that road and whack on the lights. No one passes either way.
And yet they'll continue to do it. I do think when we talk about expanding the speed camera program, we really do need to try to figure it out to apply these cameras to these stop signs on school buses, because it's going to take fines for people to knock it off. And we should be reporting, just like we do with other incidents. Like there was a police presence out in CBS one afternoon last week, and they pulled over 32 people speeding in the school zones. Let's put those headlines out there, because if people know that there's more and more folks getting $1,200 tickets, maybe, just maybe, that'll slow people down. Even though, it might not be the deterrent that we hope it is, but maybe it will be.
Well, hopefully, you got to work out something, Patty. I won't be around for it, but I hope it works out for the better, because, like I said, I don't want to see no one's kid get hurt.
Me neither. I mean, you'd ruin that family's life, and if you're the driver, your life will be ruined too, mentally and or the time you're going to spend in the clink. Bill, what do you got planned for your retirement?
Well, boy, I'll be 74 on my birthday. I'm just going to spend time down at I got a trailer, but I turned her into a cabin. That's where we spend most of our time.
Nice. And where do you have that planted?
Down in Panama. And I drive on the Port-au-Port Peninsula, only a short distance, but that's where I drive, sir.
Good man. I appreciate making time for the show. Congratulations on a long run as a school bus driver.
Okay. Take care, Paddy, and best of luck to you.
You too, Bill. Thank you. Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, it might not be an issue that you see or deal with, but I hear the stories all the time. And I don't know where this particular lady went. Pretty sure it was Mount Pearl. And she would video this particular issue from her living room. And so she'd point the camera out and she'd send me videos fairly frequently. Frequently enough to know that it is a major league problem. I don't know what has happened. I don't know if she's still with us or she's just given up on the task, but it's sure common. Let's take a break. When we come back, Lisa, you're next to talk about the Inuit harvesters up in Hopedale. They're trying to get a meeting with the Inuit leadership. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 2. Lisa, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Patty, and thank you for having me on again.
No problem.
I'm calling on behalf of the Inuit harvesters of Nunatsiavut. We continue to advocate for their livelihood. So I'm calling from Hopedale this morning, and there was an open house invitation for members that came from President Lamp and the ministers of the government, of Nunatsiavut government, where we had an opportunity to present our concerns of moving 43% of the inshore communal northern shrimp allocation to the offshore. So we had an opportunity to ask why and how one member would receive such a large amount, and we questioned the special privileges that other members weren't availed to. So some of the other concerns we presented were conflict of interest, job loss, and the offshore corporate tie. So these 6 members, Inuit harvesters of Labrador, that had their allocations revoked, they know their cultural, spiritual, and traditional connection to the sea, as this is what they've been doing a lifetime. They've been fish harvesters. So without warning, it's a grave injustice. There's a lot of concern for the members. So we're happy that we had an opportunity to finally present to our members and our president of these grave concerns. So also, I found out yesterday, as you know, we have a petition that's circulating, and we found out the process under our Nunatsiavut government law is we had to have a member accept our minister, accept our petition, and now they're going to present it, and luckily enough we did have one accept it. So our petition is going to be presented at the assembly today, and all the ministers are meeting. So that's a good thing. The timing was right. We were able to have our petition presented. So I'd like to say now the outcome from last night's open house meeting, we have hope. We had a good debate, and the results are, we believe we are restoring the connection between our members and the members who represent us as Nunatsiavut government ministers. The Economic Development Department minister had asked for some more information, so we're starting a conversation, which is positive. We still, I believe we opened up their minds a little more, so that's a good thing. So the Inuit harvesters feel that there is a better way. The Labrador Inuit should be the first and foremost before any company, especially. And lastly, I'd like to say the time is of the essence, as DFO opened up Area 6 yesterday, approximately 3 p.m. So
that said, this year is out of the question for all intents and purposes.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't agree with that. Us designates, we receive tentative allocations, so anything can change between now and when we go to pick up our conditions. So, there's still time to have these allocations reinstated, as we have asked in our petition. we've also asked for an independent review to see what went wrong, and something's not working right, and the membership is not happy with it. So let's get back to the table and have some discussion on it, and allow the members or the harvesters who know their jobs best out to sea. Let us be part of that conversation. So what we've done, one other thing that we've done, and we feel we've been forced to, because this is a grave injustice, not to just the harvesters and their crew, but the whole membership can be affected by this. So the 6 harvesters have retained a lawyer, and so we're getting legal advice now, as we do have legal documentation. We have factual information, and these 6 designates have historical landings as far back 20 years, 10 years, 7 years. And we got nothing against new applicants coming in, sure, but don't knock out, people that's been doing this a lifetime for a new entrant that has been out of the fishery for 20 years. We welcome anybody that wants to participate and be part of this industry, but we got to do it fairly and transparently, and it's meant for all members of Nunatsiavut. So they come first and foremost. Outside company, offshore corporate interests is not what the membership is accepting. And so that's an update on where...
Fair enough. If you don't think it's too late for this season, when would it be too late? Because if Area 6 is already opened, and you know full well that when it gets opened, and if the conditions are conducive, people are fishing.
Right. We're talking about Area 4 and 5. So
okay.
Luckily enough, Area 4 and 5 is not open yet.
When are they scheduled to open?
They can open any day, any minute. Like
okay.
Yesterday, we seen the email for Area 6. So... we still have time, and so we have hope, and we feel we're restoring the connection between the ministers and the people that they represent.
I appreciate the update. I'm sure everyone does. Thanks for the call this morning, Lisa.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take good care.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
you
bye-bye.
Too. Bye-bye.
Okay, there we go. So we'll see what the deadline or the whatever the right word is there. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 3. Elaine, you're on the air. Hi, Elaine. Line number 3. Dave, is that pot up by chance?
Hello,
Hi
I'm
there.
here.
Okay, go right ahead.
I turned down the radio. Shoot. I was listening about the school buses. Do school buses have cameras that they can catch the speeders?
Some do. Now, it was, I'm going to guess 2018, when there was an allegation of a sexual assault on a school bus. The Privacy Commissioner said that they can put cameras on school buses, but I don't think it's been made mandatory. No, I know some of the drivers have purchased their own dash cams.
Well, they should be mandatory on school buses. I've been behind cars that pull out and pass when the sign is out that you aren't supposed to. Like you say, I see them at the next red light or stop sign. So where do they think they're going? Another thing, I think the fines should be at least $1,000.
Well, they can be. The fine for illegally passing a school bus could be between $500 and $1,200.
And it should be 12, not 5.
Fair enough.
No, I mean, why 500? They're fools. I mean, they're taking children's lives in their hands, and why are they in such a hurry to get to the next red light? It just doesn't make any sense. And no, to me, the fine should be as high as they can possibly make it.
I think
too late if somebody gets hurt or killed. Too late.
Absolutely. And I hate to say these types of things, but it feels like it's only a matter of time before someone gets struck.
And it will. It's going to happen.
Not good. Certainly
no, that
scary
is not.
stuff.
So maybe if the fines were really heightened, maybe it would stop It's not going to stop them all, but it would stop some.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And, you know, for folks who have done it, and if you're listening to the show now and you're kind of frustrated with how people are talking about the issue, just think down the road, just a little tiny bit. You know, because some people just kind of check their brains in the trunk when they get behind the wheel and they just become oblivious. But can you just, even for a second, imagine what your life would feel like if and when you struck and hurt or killed a child? What do you think that would mean to their families? And just for you as an individual, do you think that you'd be able to live with yourself? And if the answer is no, then take that into consideration when you're behind or coming towards a school bus. When the bus is stopped and the stop sign is out and the lights are flashing, just stop. It's not going to be there forever. It's not going to ruin your day. It's not going to cause you to be late for some sort of ultra important meeting. Yeah. So just relax.
Yeah, but I don't understand what would you call it, the thought. What are they thinking?
I don't know.
They aren't thinking.
Probably not.
Yeah. But anyway, no, that is my opinion. I think the fine should be, I don't know, put through the roof. And at least it would stop some people.
Yeah.
Not gonna stop all of them.
And then there's the thought of whether or not some folks who are willing to behave like that behind the wheel are willing or wanting or will ever pay the fine, you know. So there's also
there you
part
go,
of the problem. Elaine, I appreciate the call. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Before we get to the break, let's go and see what's for supper at the Legion Branch number 1. Jennifer, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. Jennifer again from Legion on Black Marsh Road, branch number 1. Just want to remind everybody about our flipper and roast beef dinner, June 10th. Pickup times are between 4 and 5:30, and eat-in is at 6, $25 a ticket.
How's sales going?
Oh, good. Excellent. We even put out more tickets, actually, because they were going so well.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it.
Yep. And I wanted to also mention that on Canada Day weekend, on June 29th, we're going to be having a Canada Day weekend dinner and dance. Chicken or roast beef dinner, 7 p.m. Tickets are $25 for members and $30 for non-members.
Also sounds good. What's a sellout? Say, for instance, how many tickets can you possibly sell and how many dinners can you produce, say, for this roast beef and flipper dinner?
We put out, for the flipper for sure, we put out 200.
Okay.
And roast beef, we put out about 150 for roast beef because mostly are coming for the flippers. But we still upwards of 50 or 60, I believe, for the roast beef also. So, yeah, so like I said, Legion can hold in the ballroom 200 and in the games room, comfortably 75. So we got more than enough space.
Sounds like it. Yeah, it's a pretty big building. I've been in there before.
It is. Yeah, and we got a lot of upgrades done now too here lately, so the building is looking lovely.
I'm glad to hear it. Good luck with both of the dinners, especially the dinner and the dance. Who's providing the music for the dance?
The dance on the 29th will be, let me just have a look there. Now, Dress Strugnall is who's playing for the Canada Day dinner and dance.
Fair ball. What's the number if people want to order up a flipper?
579-8300 or 579-8281.
Sounds great, Jennifer. Thanks for this. Good luck.
Thanks, Patty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There you go. Flipper dinner, all the rage. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. So Connie Pike, she's with Miles for Smiles, and she joins us on the line. Good morning, Connie. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How's it going?
Not too bad, I suppose. How about you?
Good. Busy month. We're trying to do some work ahead of the summer coming up where everybody seems to take a break. So I wanted to let you know the numbers for May month, and they weren't good. We had 428 cases listed in our provincial courts. The only one that wasn't involved was Grand Bank, but 9 out of 10 courts, there were 428 charges of offenses involving children read, and 79 offenders were responsible for those 428 charges. Patty, I know that we've been getting a lot of calls about children on buses and bus safety and things like that. And I'm certainly not going to diminish that in any way, shape, or form, or negate the impact that it has on children and families and so on. And I heard you mention about the police possibly, I think you mentioned earlier this morning, the police possibly calling in weekly to give numbers and things like that.
Well, actually, I'm not going to commit them to anything because they haven't committed to anything themselves. I'm suggesting that just updates can maybe just, more information is more power. More power is probably going to lead to people slowing down and hopefully pragmatic or positive outcomes. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, no, I knew you were just suggesting it, and I hope they take you up on that. As a matter of fact, it kind of brought to mind a program we used to run in the 90s, and so I'm talking 30 years ago. 30 years ago, we used to call once a week and update the public on crimes against people. It was involving women and children, and we give the weekly numbers just so that the public knew it was separate and different from crimes against property. And I'd really like to see that program resurrected by the police, because I think people kind of glaze over numbers. They say, oh, well, there were, 8,000 cases in all the courts this past month or whatever. But the fact that we have to sit down and count the numbers that involve children, there's no highlighting of that number. There's no highlighting the crimes against women. And in my mind, based on everything I'm seeing and hearing, and I'm not the only one, I mean, these numbers are at epidemic proportions, like 428 cases listed in 1 month in 9 courtrooms in this small province. And we only see less than 10% of cases getting reported. So you just have to 10 times that number. And you can imagine the number of children that are at risk, that are being hurt, that are being damaged, that will have lifelong mental health issues. I mean, I know getting on and off the bus is critical. It's critical for the children, for the drivers, for the parents, and nobody wants to see a child hurt at a bus stop. Trust me, I've witnessed it. It's not something you'd ever want to see. But we also have to think about the things that aren't physically in front of us, the ways in which children are being hurt by other means and are not seen, because these crimes are so hidden and so secretive and not talked about. The majority of children, the offenses are committed against someone that they know, committed by someone that they know. And, Patty, I can even see that changing now. I think we're in a different realm now because of all the social media and the crimes. We have children ages 8 and 9 who are receiving inappropriate sexual messaging from people online. And it's kind of scary to think that 1 in 3 young people say the friends that they make online are among their closest confidants. And sometimes these are people they've never even met in person. They think they're talking to someone else. So in terms of stranger assaults, I think we're going to see more of that through, child exploitation and sharing images and so on. The other thing I would like to mention, Patty, the numbers that I gave you, we had in rapid succession new cases last week, and I couldn't find that they were included in the numbers that I've given you for May. We had 2 retired teachers from Gander Collegiate. One lives in Bay Roberts now, one charged in Clarenville, and I get a feeling that may be another case similar to the Marcus Hicks case, because they've been charged with offenses going back over time, and it involves a large number of children. So I think in those circumstances, sometimes you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. So there's going to be more involving those two people, I believe. We had two 22-year-olds last week who were charged. One was charged with a separate offense of sexual assault. It appears as though it was against an adult, but it involved choking, and it was assault causing bodily harm, so pretty serious. And the other 22-year-old was charged with a number of offenses against children. We had a 66-year-old last week who approached a young person on Topsail Road, and I can tell you that brought back memories of Dana Bradley, and I don't want to see anything like that ever happen to a young person again. We had a 17-year-old, I believe it was on Friday night, who stabbed a 17-year-old girl. I mean, it's just, that was almost daily last week. It was mind-boggling. And again, my frustration, and I think a lot of people who work in the field are frustrated because we tend to glaze over these reports and we don't highlight them and we don't collectively speak up against them. You know, we all have agency. We can all make a difference. We can all learn to do more and do better. Just like with training the public now in terms of the license plates and the bus stops and safe bus stops and all of those things, I think we really need to turn our attention to the other epidemic that's really hurting children.
Well, just from where I sit, I try to, if it's a matter of prioritizing areas, then fair enough. But of course, we all concern ourselves with different things at different stages, with different levels of concern or severity. So I guess that's how conversations organically happen here on this program. Last question before I let you go, Connie. So when you bring us the monthly numbers, do you or any of your colleagues at Miles for Smiles do the follow-up with how many of these charges have been proven in court and convictions have been in place?
No, Patty, we just collect the monthly numbers because they're fluid, they change, there could be postponements, delays. We just count the actual numbers that are appearing on the dockets each month, and some of that may carry over to another month, but still it's all averaging out to be about 340 cases per month, no matter how you cut it. You could be in 3 days of trial in 2 different months, but just that the numbers always average out the same since we've been collecting them.
Fair enough. Connie, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty, very much.
Take good care. Bye-bye.
You too.
It's Connie Pike, Miles for Smiles. I mean, average 300 plus sexual and or physical assault against children. Cases are heard in Supreme Court. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 5. Justin, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
That's kind. How about you?
Not too bad. Just want to call in about, the speed cameras that they're going to put up, mostly throughout Metro.
Yep.
I think it's a complete waste of time, to be completely honest with you. I understand the safety aspect behind it and all that, trying to get people to slow down. I have a problem with that. I think that the money and the resources that are going to go towards all this, it's just not going to work. I lived away for a few years, and they do have, photo radar, and, you get your ticket in the mail, and if you don't pay it when you go to register your vehicle, of course, if you don't pay it, you're not getting your vehicle registered. But the big thing, I think, is enforcement. There's people out there now driving around, of course, with these washed-out license plates and whatnot, and now that they know that these cameras are there, most people are just going to be like, well, I'm not going to go do it. And I just don't think that it fixes the problem if you don't have the proper enforcement out there.
Well, it's fair ball. So the results from last summer in Paradise and Mount Pearl are pretty staggering numbers. Over 94,000 warnings were issued, and 86% of the license plates scanned were readable, 14 were not. I think some suggestions that have been made, for instance, like this. Just make it a wide, province-wide, well understood, often repeated, that you've got, pick a number, 30, 45, 60 days to get your license plate replaced. If you do not, you get a ticket for sure. That's it. I mean, something like that might be able to work. And then the concept of people maybe not paying the fines, period, of which there's some $50 million outstanding in unpaid fines today. You know, the Justice Department is working on a community service project for those who do not pay up. So that can hopefully alleviate any of the concerns with, I don't care, I'm not going to pay that ticket, you know, because we got lots of people driving around with vehicles that aren't registered, they got no insurance, no license, right?
Exactly. The point that you just made, I guess, sending those folks out to do, you know, clean up and do community service and whatnot, I think that's an amazing idea, and an easier way, I guess, to make them follow through on, I guess, a way to pay their fine or whatnot. So that is a good point, but I think the main thing is what it comes down to is enforcement, because I spend a lot of time on the road. I used to be a commercial driver for 16 years. A lot of stuff that I see on the road, it's either people choose not to care or they just don't understand the rules of the road. You can go on any road here and try and go through a free-flow traffic sign, and I would argue that continually mistake it for a yield, and that can sometimes cause accidents when people don't know the rules of the road. There's a multitude of rules that I see get broken daily, on a daily basis. People can't stop at a stop sign correctly, they come to a rolling stop and they go, and I could go on and on, and I just think it's a horrible situation. And another thing I just wanted to touch on quickly, I used to drive a school bus here in Metro, and one solution that I came up with, and people might think I'm crazy or whatnot, but we all know there's a stop sign that comes out on the bus. It just kind of opens up. It's probably only, you know, your average size stop sign. On most buses these days, there's a long, I guess, stick or whatnot that comes out. So when children are getting off the bus, they're walking well in front so you can see them and whatnot. Well, I think what they need to do is have a stop sign that comes out into the other lane. Big stop sign with a light on it, so when the drivers are coming towards the bus, if the stop sign is right there in their face, it's kind of hard to miss it.
Fair enough. Yeah, make it like a physical obstacle.
Yes, like literally out in the other lane. So let's say if under worse circumstances they decide they don't see that stop sign that's right in their face, God forbid a child or someone got struck, which would be worst case scenario. But I think with the way people drive these days, who are quite oblivious at times, if it's right there, right in front of your face, it's kind of hard to miss.
Yeah, if the choice is stop or hit it, then I would think most people would stop. And you talk about the rules of the road or what have you. Rolling stops is one thing, but the apparent inability for many to be able to navigate a four-way stop is really quite something. That one jumps out all the time. And even just how people are supposed to try to merge into traffic is also problematic, I would suggest.
Yes, I've actually spoken with people and whatnot, and I've had people argue that, you know, you need to get into the left lane when other people are trying to merge on the highway. It's a courteous thing to do that. That's not a rule of the road. Yes, it's, you know, it's quite nice, you know, if you're driving up and you see someone merging, if you can get over safely, sure, give them that break. But it's not a rule of the law that you have to, and I think that when people are getting their licenses or whatever the case may be, I think it should be much more stringent to allow people on the road. And I think it would make it a lot safer if people would just attempt to educate themselves a little bit better on the rules of the road.
Appreciate the time, Justin. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. All the best. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, there you go. Let's go ahead and take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Greg. You're on the air.
Oh, good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
I'm okay, thank you. How about you?
Oh, not too bad. I wanted to call in this morning, I guess, to talk about a little bit about healthcare, I guess. So my father was recently admitted into the health science there about 10 days ago. And I guess, you know, when you come into, and we hear a lot about it, but when you come into the emergency, when you came into them, it's kind of a little bit reminiscent of a MASH unit. There's people everywhere, and you know, it's a little bit daunting. But I guess for me, I wanted to kind of compliment and talk to the people that are working in these conditions, in this environment, and who are in here providing the care that that patients need, because you know, when my dad came in, he wasn't very well, and as he was here, he progressed and was pretty much in a pretty critical condition. We weren't sure if he was actually going to be able to come out of this, and you know, the level of care and the support that he's gotten from nurses, from doctors, residents, respiratory therapists. You know, in the 10 days we've been here, we've seen a lot of different faces, from surgeons, cardiologists, anesthesiologists, you know, surgery residents. We've seen intensivists in ICU, and all of these physicians, for the most part, have been exceptional. They've been, you know, very kind and patient, and informed us of exactly what was going on, and have been very empathetic as well, as we were kind of going through some very difficult situations. The nurses are, you know, unbelievable. The level of kindness, the level of care, and, you know, especially, I would just want to draw attention to, I guess, he was on 4 North B for, I guess, 4 or 5 days before he got switched to ICU. And, you know, that's a very heavy unit up there. There's a lot of stuff going on, extremely busy. And, you know, just the positivity and the, you know, I guess, like, you walk on that floor and the nurses are just, you know, everyone's smiling. They're, you know, relating to families, and they're, you know, letting you know that your loved ones are in good hands. And, you know, there's nobody, like, we didn't experience anyone who was frustrated or cranky or grumpy or, you know, things like that. And you know, in the situations that they're working in, and the stress and strain, and you know, we often hear on the news about the challenges with healthcare in Newfoundland and things of that nature. So I think it's really important to sometimes step back from looking at those challenges and just look at the people who are working in that environment, and the fact that they come to work every day, they're positive, they're kind, they're helpful, they're super supportive, very professional. You know, I've got to say, every person that we've interacted with and had you know, contact with has been more than helpful and kind and considerate. And in ICU, it's been the same thing. And, you know, the nurses are very professional, concerned, helpful. They explain everything clearly. You know, I've got a little bit of support from my wife, who's a nursing professional as well. She's a professor at MUN now, but she was on the floors for many, many years. And so I'm able to, you know, provide her with the information I get from the healthcare workers, and she kind of translates it, and then I'm able to kind of give it back to the family. But, you know, even for the people who don't have that benefit, the nurses have been so great at explaining what's happening. And, you know, even when we were at, you know, some pretty dark days, thinking that this might be the end, or he might not pull out of this, you know, the nurses were super positive and kind of boosted it us and said, look, you know, we've seen lots of people get through this, and this is not, you know, this is something that, you know, you need to have some faith and trust in the people that are there. So I guess I just wanted to give a huge shout out to the, you know, the people on the front line, the people with their feet on the ground doing the work, and send them a big thank you for everything that they've done for our dad while he's been in here. He's doing 100% better. You know, I look at him and I think it's almost a miracle, because he was very, very sick at one point, and we weren't sure what was going to happen. But we're so thankful that he's made the turn in the right direction, and hopefully he'll be able to get out of here in a few days. But it's great to see, and just want to, you know, shout out to those people that are here doing a fantastic job.
It can't be overstated just how important that type of treatment is, not only for the recovery and the healing for the person who is sick, but for the family. Because if you run into roadblocks of miscommunication and or frustrated staff, or the lack of compassion or bedside manner, it makes everything that much worse. So to experience it the way you have, I'm sure has meant the world to your family, and has made a difficult situation a little bit easier to try to navigate. I mean, we just can't overstate how important this is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, like you just said, like it's a huge, you know, break for the family when they're able to feel that, you know, their loved ones are in the right hands, that the people that are working with them are doing everything that they possibly can. And not only that they're doing everything that they possibly can, but they're telling you, and their actions and their facial expressions and the way that they communicate with you let you believe, yes, these people really care and they really want to do what's best for our family member and for our loved one. And, it's a huge piece. I think that sometimes it's overlooked when we get caught up in, things about infrastructure. Now, by no means is the health sciences a gem of a facility, but we need to look past those things and look at the people that are there, and they are doing an absolute phenomenal job in the environment that they're in and the stresses that they're under, and their ability to communicate has been fantastic for us as a family. So really, really appreciate everything that's been happening. And I just want to let people know that, when you're in this situation, it's easy to get frustrated, but, think about the people that are working with your family members and realize that, they're doing the best that they can in the situation they're in.
Greg, I'm really pleased to hear this. And once again, please pass along my best wishes to your dad in particular and to the whole family.
I will, Paddy. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Take good care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. There we go. I like those stories. And look, I understand the complaints that we have about the system. And sure, I complain about it. And we need to keep all those issues on the front burner. But sometimes lost in the shuffle are the top quality pros that are in the system. And so I do appreciate those stories, and I'm sure they do as well. All right, let's check in on the Twitter before we get to the newscast. We're VOCM Openline. You know what to do. Follow us there. Questions, comments, concerns, share them on Twitter. Our email address is openline@vocm.com. Let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, Jim's here to talk about Marine Atlantic. We're going to talk about modular homes and then whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 4. Jim, you're on the air.
Morning, Paddy.
Morning to you.
I'm calling about Marine Atlantic. The ferry crossing is supposed to be our extension to the Trans-Canada Highway, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Now, this new boat that they got for their Argentia run is having mechanical issues. Well, whatever. Anyway, the Argentia run does 2 crossings per week. The Port of Bass run does 14 passenger crossings per week, one way. Why does Marine Atlantic have to shut down the entire Port of Bass run to fill in for these 2 crossings a week?
I'm not entirely sure what that question means. I'm sorry, Jim.
Okay,
what do you mean by shutting down?
Well, they will not take any reservations from June 10th until July 5th currently. And if you go on their website, as soon as you click the book button.
As soon as you click the button? Sorry, did we lose Jim? I'd like to finish that conversation because, of course, he's not wrong. The call just dropped. That maybe that's his cell phone connection. We'll see if we get Jim back. We'll hear lots of concerns voiced about Marine Atlantic, whether it be the cost recovery model. And just a reminder, Marine Atlantic has to recover costs to the tune of 65% through ticket sales. So that's pretty steep. And then we talk about the amount of money transferred from the federal government to Marine Atlantic operations, the funding for the vessels, the types of vessels, the number of cabins, the pet-friendly cabins, all the rest of it. So we'll get Jim to further elaborate his thoughts on 4. Jim, you're back on the air.
Sorry, Paddy, I guess we got cut off there somewhere. I'm not even sure where I ended.
Well, you were talking about why does Marine Atlantic have to shut down the entire Port of Bass run for a certain amount of time? I just wanted you to elaborate on that.
Okay. Like I was saying, the Argentia run has 2 crossings per week. Why don't they take one of the 3 boats that's on the Port of Bass run, use that for the Argentia run for the time being, and leave the Port of Bass run as it is?
Fair question.
Right now, they're not taking any reservations whatsoever for 14 passenger boats per week, one direction. Say from North Sydney to Newfoundland, there's 14 crossings per week. There's 2 per day. They're not taking any new reservations for any of those crossings because the Argentia run may need the space. How does 2 boats need the space of 14 boats?
I don't know. It's a fair question. Well, albeit it's somewhat confusing, but...
The reason is upsetting to me is right now I'm in Nova Scotia stuck and cannot get home.
So what happens when you click the book now button? It simply gives you a pop-up that says no bookings will be taken from this date to this date?
I have it right here.
Okay.
It says customer notice, June 4th, 2024. A mechanical issue identified with the, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce name, may impact our schedule. As we work to understand these possible impacts, we have temporarily closed reservations on all sailings between June 10th and July 5th. Once impacts are better understood and impacted customers will be notified and accommodated. Any additional capacity will be made available for new bookings during this period. My point is, if I need to go on June 11th, which I was trying to book to go home on June 11th, how are they going to make that up on June 16th? They can't. I'm stuck in Nova Scotia. I'm stuck with my Trans-Canada Highway closed.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily understand the rationale behind all of this, but what we can try to do is get an update from Marine Atlantic right here live on the program. Last time we reached out to Daryl Mercer, who's their communications officer, he came on right away. So I will put this to him. And also,
well, I'd like.
Go ahead.
I'd like an answer to that question. Why is it taking 14 boats per week to make up for these two crossings?
So 14 runs, you mean?
I mean, how 14 boats, one direction, because there are 2 boats per day, correct?
Yeah.
There's a boat at lunchtime leaves North Sydney to go to Newfoundland, and there's a boat at midnight leaves North Sydney to go to Newfoundland. So there's 2 per day. For 1 week, that's 14 boats headed to Newfoundland. All of those are canceled. Or not, the boats aren't canceled, the reservations are canceled.
Reservations are cancelled. Okay, that's the answer I'll try to get as to why, and maybe get a timeline update for the repairs to the new vessel. And there's lots of rumours rumbling around as to what the problem is there. They're calling it issues with the lubrication system, but then we got people saying that there was water put in the diesel tanks and all the rest of it. So I'll get some answers as soon as I possibly can, Jim.
I thank you very much.
I appreciate your time.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Yeah, that's fair enough. I don't know why they would close the reservations at this point, but we'll see if we can get Daryl Mercer to come on the show and give us an update. Let's go to line number 2. Gerald, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How you doing?
Doing okay. How about you?
No, we're in the big bind up here on the West Coast, meaning that anybody coming from Port Bass, going to Deer Lake, they got the road closed off on the bottom of Massey Drive to Riverside Drive. There's a tractor trailer overturned, and they're going to be at least hour and a half to get it all fixed up. So you cannot go east nowhere.
It's interesting that you called on this, Gerald, because as you popped into on my call screen, an email floated in from someone else in the area, and apparently it's a tanker that's overturned. So hope there's no spill, because that would further delay the clear up and the clean up. And this gets complicated because there's no other way around. Riverside Drive still closed 2 months later after the landslide.
Exactly, Patty. So I mean, like I said, it's going to be. I was talking to one of the guys who said right on the intersection. He said it's going to be an hour or maybe hour and a half before. Like you said, now if it's a spill, it could be longer. But he said that it's going to be an hour and a half before they get it open. But hopefully they're going to get it open. But like I said, we're blocked. We're anybody going east, Pat Cornerick, and we'll get the.
Yeah, obviously a real problem when there's no other way around. And fingers crossed, it's nothing more than just trying to get the truck back on the 4 wheels, or the however many wheels are on the tanker, and get the road back open, because there is no other way around. Period.
And Patty, this is the bad time in the morning because people just got out the boat, and there's going to be a lot of traffic.
Another good point. Yep.
All right, Patty, you have a good day.
You too. I appreciate the heads up. Thanks, Gerald.
No problem.
There you go. Bye-bye. And, when that landslide took place, and if I remember correctly, it swept a vehicle into the river. Nobody was seriously injured, but, they talk about the buildup of water at the top of that hill, and consequently all that landslide material ended up on Riverside Drive. I'm not sure, I can't recall, I read the story a few days ago regarding the complications with getting it cleaned up, but what we thought was going to be a couple of weeks has now exceeded a couple of months, and so obviously that's a problem further complicated today with this tanker having been overturned. Before we get to another call, I don't want to sneak it in because we're too close to the break, is once again on the West Coast, and you talk about the wreck house house area. There's been calls for more to be done and potential closures of that stretch of road when the winds are so high that it's blowing tractor trailers over. So there are warning signs leading into the wreck house, but like in other parts of the country, for instance, the Columbia Icefields Parkway in between Jasper and Banff National Parks, they close that when the conditions become too treacherous. And, you know, if you've got plans and you've got deadlines, you've got to be somewhere going in either direction, it's just too bad about you. And it's not all simply about landslides and rock slides, which happen fairly frequently on that stretch of road, one of the most beautiful stretches of highway in the world. They actually tape a lot of automobile commercials on that stretch of highway. But when it, even if we say snow, they will close it. The end. And no one can pass through until they deem it to be safe. And I think the same can be said if we're talking about safety, is for when the wind is so high on that stretch of highway, and you see the stories as often as I do, is tractor trailers getting blown over. And of course, it's not just about that tractor trailer and the person behind the wheel of that truck, it's about the other traffic. For instance, traffic coming at you or coming at that truck. And the next thing you know, there's a transport truck in your lane. So we heard that call not that long ago. Never really got much traction. I don't know if we heard from any of the members of the House of Assembly about that concept, specifically inside the Department of Highways, Infrastructure, and what have you, or Transportation and Infrastructure. But I'll float that idea out there, see if you have any thoughts on it. Let's see what's shaking on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. You know what to do. Email address is openline@vocm.com. And my preference is when you pick up the phone to give us a shout, just like Mark and Chris have done. If you're in the St. John's metro region, it's 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. We're taking a break, and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Mark, you're on the air.
Hey, Patty, how's it going?
Doing okay. How you doing?
Pretty good. Almost seeing the sun out there. It's kind of shocking, actually.
Yeah, someone sent me a picture of just the slightest bit of sunshine sneaking through the pea soup, but let's hope this doesn't last as long as it's forecasted. It's a bit much.
Yeah, it's getting a little overwhelming. I just wanted to call in, Patty. We had started back just at Christmas time. We started a fundraiser called Bringing Down the House. That was designed to bring one unit down, one modular unit from Ontario. That's currently they're being used there in Ontario to deal with homelessness. So in Waterloo and Herb Street, there's a 50-unit community with a central building to provide wraparound supports. And I just wanted to let folks know that we've stopped that fundraiser. We never really, we didn't get to where we needed we didn't raise the amount of money we needed. So we got to about $7,500, but we needed about $22,000 to get that unit down. And I just kind of wanted to go through, some of the reasons perhaps that it didn't, we didn't get the follow-up that we would have liked. We had a huge issue with the first host of our fundraiser, which was charitable. And we got up to just over $6,500, I think, with that. And that was hosted with... That was hosted by the Community Foundation of NL, but then they pulled their support a couple days later. So we had to start over, and then we brought it up to $7,500. And we never really saw a lot of support from government on this as well as a solution. And that was kind of concerning because, every other province has this type of modular house as a solution to homelessness.
So you're using $22,000 as a price point installed for a modular home?
Not installed. So installed, typically these are done in 50-unit communities, right? So a 50-unit community is about $1.79 million. That's my calculations for shipping, installation, plumbing, electricity, everything. And this is an 8x13 unit that somebody stays in. It's a locked door, comes with a fridge, comes with a bed, comes with a desk, shelves, lighting, everything. All you do is hook it up to like a 30-amp circuit. So there's a bit of land prep that needs to be done. I've met with the mayor of St. John's and Ron Ellsworth, city councillor, and planning as well, to determine, what would be needed here in the city to make it happen. And it's very little. It's we don't need a cement pad. We don't, there are many things that that would normally be needed in the construction of a house to bring it to standards. The whole point of the design of this unit up in Ontario was to make it simple and to allow people, allow organizations, allow government, allow municipalities to just place these and put people in them and keep them alive, keep them warm.
I looked around because we've talked about modular homes. I actually put this question directly to the Minister of Housing, Fred Hutton, just last week here on the programme. The numbers I come up with are a little bit different and a little bit higher. So, if we're talking 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,200 square feet, can start at around 95,000 installed. So the numbers I see are a little bit higher than the numbers I've heard from you and others. And I know that that's far less than if we're talking about traditional construction of a single-family dwelling, but I don't know where the disparity is, or whether I'm, looking in the wrong spots or what have you, because I've got it at about $350 a square foot.
Yeah, you're looking probably at modular housing solutions. This is a unit built by Now Housing in Cambridge, Ontario. It's designed specifically, it's been designed based on, attacking the issue of homelessness specifically. So they sell them for $21,500. I've been in touch with them almost daily over the past several months, Patty, and we have a great relationship. But yeah, $21,500, and this basically it's almost like a room for somebody. The central buildings for these units in Waterloo, and I visited back in December. I visited Waterloo. I also visited a better tent city, which was what these units were sort of based on. It was like, a better tent city housing, but 2.0, because, what they're essentially using at a better tent city in Kitchener is pretty much sheds. That it's a great project. But Now Housing designed essentially a sea can, a shipping container, cut in 3, fully fireproof, completely up to CSA standards, and it's a essentially indestructible unit with heating, with air conditioning, and like I said, bed, fridge, all the lights, everything. So yeah, $21,500. The central building is about $550,000. So the obvious sort of location for that type of community here would be in an area that would be deemed, zoned for affordable housing, which ideally would be Pleasantville Phase 2. There are, in Waterloo, Patty, they placed this community more outside of the city, just to avert from having sort of NIMBYism. And that seems to be working okay. There's definitely some huge benefits to it. But here, what I've heard from homeless folks, is, or, people experiencing homelessness, are that they want to have access to some services, and downtown would be more realistic. But I honestly don't think we could put a 50-unit community downtown in any other place other than the Grace Hospital location. So for something like that, for Pleasantville Phase 2 or for the Grace Hospital, it's simply a matter of flattening out the space, putting up fencing, providing sewer and water to that central building with the wraparound supports in it, and then providing the wiring and the electricity, 30 amps, like I said, to each of these 50 units. So it's about, like I said, about $1.79 million for 50 units, including the central building with wraparound supports. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, the whole concept of NIMBY, I think that's going to be a larger conversation, not just talking about housing for the homeless or those who are precariously just barely hanging on, but when we talk about the amount of homes that need to be built and population density and the look of neighbourhoods is going to change, that's going to bring upon a lot of backlash. It just really truly is. People are used to the current lifestyle and the current makeup of their neighbourhoods, and some neighbourhoods will change, whether it be with the addition of duplexes or triplexes or multi-unit small apartment buildings, because the city's been quite clear on that. There's also opportunities for feedback. There's been some town hall meetings down in the forum room. So a lot of this kind of blends itself together with, you know, how we deal with the amount of homes we need to build, whether it be for folks who can afford them and or for folks who can't.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to get into, you know, what I sent to you last week and other media folks was a bit of a comparison there between the 106 Airport Road solution versus these modular solutions. Now, we didn't get the pickup from nonprofits, from private shelter operators, and even from municipalities that we had hoped, because these are the folks that are using these solutions elsewhere in the country. But I wanted to throw some numbers out there, Patty. The Comfort Inn 106 Airport Road lease is $6.9 million for a total of $13 million per year. That's what's in the budget. So right now, with that in mind, if we extended that for 3 years, we're looking at about $39 million. With $39 million using the Now Housing sleeper cabin, it's called, that solution, we could do 250 units and 5 central buildings. That's 250 people. Right now, there's 11 people in our last report at the hotel on Airport Road. So just the lease amount right now, to date, like from February 13th when they took the lease on till now, we are spending about $1,700 per day per person. And so far we spent about $194,000 per person. So, I mean, at that cost right now, we almost could buy houses for people. Certainly around Bay, we could buy houses for people. The wraparound supports aren't even there as far as we know at the moment. And so if you compare the numbers, and if you compare, if you look at some of these initiatives across the country, they're working, and they're done very quickly. So we could have had 100 units within 6 months. If we started October 1st, we would have had them by the end of March. So, I mean, this is the kind of speed and response that we would expect the housing minister to take on and to really delve into it. And it's been 3 months. He's been in this position for 3 months. For him to call your show last week and say, well, you really need to wrap around supports with these modular houses. Well, there's nothing across the country that I've ever come across, or in all of my research, there is no project that does not have the wraparound supports included in that. I just wanted to sort of say, Patty, also on the housing front, June 3rd, the government was going to release the consultant report on shelter standards. Nothing has happened. We've heard nothing. It's June 5th. So what's going on with that? I would hope that municipalities, nonprofits, and other folks across the province would feel free to reach out to me and talk about this solution, the modular solution. And, you know, in Ontario, they're building one a day. They come down on a truck, 3 at a time. So we could have 15 within a very short period of time. That's 5 trucks, and that's probably within 2 or 3 weeks we could have that. So if folks like in other parts of the province, like for instance Corner Brook or Gander, Grand Falls, if there are organizations that want to add units to their existing shelters where there are already supports, that's very easy to do, and it's very cost effective. So I'd really like to see the housing minister, and I'd really like to see government kind of get into this. And the only thing that we've heard on this is what the housing minister said to you last week. And back in January, when Paul Pike attended a meeting with the federal housing minister and the Atlantic housing ministers, and really we've heard nothing else from government on this. So it seems like a very cost-effective tool, and I'm hoping that we can hear a little bit more about it.
I appreciate the time.
Thanks to everybody who... Sorry?
I said I appreciate the time. I thought we were done. I got to get to the news break, Mark.
Yeah, thanks very much, Patty.
No problem.
And thanks to everybody who donated, and we're still here working on the solutions. So thanks to everyone who's helping to solve the housing crisis.
Stay in touch, Mark. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Patty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Take care.
And just before we get to the news, apparently that tanker that has been that overturned out in Cornerbrook between Riverside Drive and Massey Drive, a substantial fuel spill is being reported now. So what was thought to be an hour and a half, that seems unlikely. I don't have a crystal ball. When you have a substantial fuel spill, that makes it a little bit more tricky, I would suggest, to clean up. All right, let's take a break for the news. When we come back, Chris, you stay right there. He wants to talk about safety. On where? School buses. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Chris. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Yes, I called in a guy earlier actually kind of beat me to the punch on the idea for the buses, but basically the same thing. Like this little stop sign coming out off the side of the bus is not going to do anything. Like I've seen people doing this. I've seen people passing on on blind turns, on double lines, and everything. You know, it's ridiculous. And like I said, going back to the bus, it needs to have something that comes out over halfway across the other lane, down at car level, so that if you're going to go through, you're going to beat up your vehicle some way, shape, or form. Either that, or you're going to go up onto a sidewalk or down into a ditch. There's no way around it. And have the sign at the back of the bus so that they're not trying to edge up, so that there'll be space for the kids so that they can get, lots of space for them to get across if they got to run across the road or anything like that to their homes.
I don't think it's a bad idea at all. Now, it would require reconfiguring every school bus, but so be it. I don't think it's a bad idea. I'd have to envision it a little bit more and see exactly how it might work, but anything we can do to stop people doing what they're doing.
Yeah, it takes some playing with some of the boys in at the shops there. Okay, how are we going to do this? But, have something that's going to impede anybody wanting to try to pass by that bus when the sign's out for stop, And that's it in a nutshell. And because, and like I say, and the ones that they catch now until this job gets done, what they should do with them vehicles is just take the vehicle from them and sell it. And take the money and put it towards finances for the town, for the buses and all this kind of stuff. Take the vehicle. They never get it back no more. It's gone. Even if it's brand new. No, I'm serious. What do wildlife do if you're caught poaching a moose?
Well, that's a moving target. It used to be the consensus was if you got caught poaching moose, say you were in the bush with your quad, you lost your quad, you lost your rifle, you lost your truck, you lost the rest, but that doesn't always happen. It's not generally equally applied across the board. I mean, there was a story on the West Coast last year, or whenever it was, a few years ago, where it was about poaching salmon. And there was two people at the same time doing it together. One was a so-called well-respected professional, the other maybe not so much. They got different penalties for doing the exact same thing together. So that story always pops in my mind.
The other one must have been smarter, and that's it.
I suppose, eh?
But and as for the speeders on the highway, like I've been doing a lot of traveling back and forth to Newfoundland in the past few years, and I'm going to guarantee you that people speeding on the highway and 18-wheelers up your rear end. I was going through Terranova Park one time at 90 kilometers an hour because I think that's what the speed is. But this 18-wheeler didn't realize that was the speed was, even though the sun was in front of him. And with a full load on, and he was about 10 feet from my tailgate. And he was honking on the horn and everything, trying to get me to pull off on the side of the road. And so eventually he pulled out and passed, and I met him in Clarendon.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. These people, they really need to punish them hard, to send a strong message. It's kind of like over in the Middle East. If you're caught stealing, you lose a hand.
I'm not sure about amputations.
I don't mean to lose a hand here, but I'm just saying. But you don't see people stealing over there. I have friends who worked over there, and they told me jewelry's out everywhere over there, and nothing gets touched because they know if they steal it, they'll lose a hand. They'll lose their hand.
Yeah, pretty severe stuff.
So you got to come out with hard, strong penalties that's going to make it clear to these people, and possibly too, like if they're 18 and 19-year-olds, take the vehicle, never to get it, and you don't get your license no more until you're 25 years of age, and you've grown up a bit.
Yeah, but I mean, that said, there's a lack of motoring maturity for people of various ages, I would suggest.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah.
Chris, I appreciate the call. Anything else you'd like to offer this morning?
No, that's about it. That's the two things, the speeding and the buses, because I've seen it when I was in St. John's all the time. Yeah.
I appreciate the time this morning. Thanks for this.
All right, you take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. So here we go. Dave Williams just walked into the booth and says, apparently Riverside Drive landslide open within, I think you mean the oil spill, the fuel spill, whatever it is. So they look like it's going to be open in an hour-ish, and that's the eastbound lane, which is currently closed. And sticking with school buses for a second. You know, we were long told that there was no need for seatbelts on a school bus. And that was not that long ago here in this province. There were some injuries suffered as a bus hit either it was a bump or a ditch in the road or whatever it was, and people had their heads bounced off the roof of the bus. And so apparently there was actually some real hands-on investigative work done by the Transportation Agency looking at safety versus the compartmentalization of people in a bus and the way the buses are configured, and then going through the rigorous exercises versus having seatbelts. And of course the outcome was it was safer with seatbelts. But we were long told pretty much a lie, because it just makes sense. A seatbelt makes you a lot safer than a no seatbelt, and children can indeed bounce around. And we're talking about some kids that can be pretty slight and pretty light, and it doesn't take much of a bump for them to be tossed around inside a school bus. So I'll put that back out there, because that has long been one of those issues where I think people rightfully wonder aloud, how come we don't have seatbelts? If we're talking about the precious nature of the cargo being children and trying to do what we can to protect them, then yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. And you know, the question was also asked this morning about is it mandatory for cameras to be on buses? No. In fact, the Francophone Association said they weren't going to put cameras on their buses. Inside the English-speaking school board, or I guess it's all in the Department of Education now. Well, I don't think the Francophone Association's in, but anyway, the English-speaking group are in the Department of Education. The allegation was back in 2018 when there was the thought or the allegation or the accusation that there had been a sexual assault on a school bus. And the Privacy Commissioner looked at it and then came back and said, yes, the department or the board at that time can indeed put cameras on the buses, because nothing quite tells the tale like the tape, as they say. Right, let's go to the tape, because the he said, she said, and the fact that you can't oblige the bus driver to have eyes looking in the rearview mirror, looking back into the bus all the time, when their job is to pretty much look forward and to safely navigate the roads, the highways, or the side streets, wherever that school bus might be operating. So there's been lots of thought and conversation on that here this morning. Quick note as it pertains to the Bank of Canada. We knew that there was an announcement coming today, and after 10 consecutive increases to the overnight benchmark interest rate, there was a cut today. Not huge, but 25 basis points. So 4.75, if I remember correctly, is now the interest rate going forward. We know what that has meant for people trying to service their debt. We know what that's meant for people who have to get into the business of renewing their mortgage, because some of that renewal mortgage sticker shock has been extreme. So a little bit of relief coming. You know, the worry in some corners is that, you know, inflation is not licked as of yet. You know, to get back into that 2% where the Bank of Canada likes to have it. And it has been coming down, even though people think and say they don't feel it coming down, because I'm with you. As the grocery shopper, I'm not feeling a whole lot of relief. On top of that, though, the Bank of Canada has pretty much said the quiet part out loud. It's going to hurt before it gets better. And, you know, if the two major inputs that are still making inflation quite stubborn are being housing and energy, well, both are further complicated and no end in sight, really, as pertains to those two inputs. We know what the issue is regarding pricing on housing. It's absolutely a seller's market. And, you know, the thought is, you know, capping prices based on size. But, of course, it's location. And my house is and always will be worth exactly what someone's willing to pay for it. I mean, it's hard to interrupt that particular supply and demand side of it. And Mark's talking about building the modular houses versus some of the tactics or approaches that government is taking here in this province. I have looked around at other jurisdictions about what they're doing, and whether it be the whole communal nature of, say, for instance, tiny homes with shared spaces like kitchens and the like. They are in place in other areas. I don't know if that's a solid way to move, but when you do price point comparisons and have what it costs to bring in some tiny homes or modular homes, the prefab homes, versus the amount of money we're spending for leasing for 3 years and 3 years only, the 106 Airport Road, which is not fully up and running. The last we were told, there's only 11 residents there, some 10 staff on site. So if that's going to actually work, it's going to have to be much closer to max operations than they currently see. And again, like people have rightfully pointed out, it can't just be a safer, more modern, more comfortable quasi-emergency shelter. It's got to have a real distinct focus on transition, away from homelessness, and hopefully to get the support you need regarding whether it be your addictions or mental health or whatever the case may be, because it simply can't be a case where people simply have their own room with a key and safer than an emergency shelter. And look, I guess I shouldn't be shocked at anything, but a ton of email comes in saying, look, we already foot the bill for emergency shelters to the tune of millions of dollars per year, and if that's the option, then people have to take it. It's probably easier said than done if you've never been in one of these emergency shelters. And remember, it was just last week, for the second time in very short order, there's a court case regarding a killing that happened in an emergency shelter. I mean, they were trying to debate the sentence required to be applied to this guy who had stabbed a woman in the shelter that they were both living in. So apparently the risk is real, whether it be with being exposed to drug use and you're trying to kick the habit yourself, and or the physical violence or the sexual violence. So anyway, let's check in on the Twitter before we get to our final break of the morning. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. The email address is openline@vocm.com. But when we come back, still a segment of the show available to you to talk about whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Well, I mentioned just before the break that the Bank of Canada has cut the prime benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points, and a couple of emails came in rapid fire saying, yeah, thanks for nothing. Fair enough. It's still pretty whopping big interest rate, but I wasn't expecting to be a real slice into that 5%, but some relief, I guess, is better than just holding firm and or what we saw for 10 consecutive increases. Another sort of some of the big stories on the national front that, for one reason or another, isn't getting any traction on this program today, but the issue regarding foreign interference into our elections has now transferred into domestic collaboration. There's unnamed members of parliament that were working directly with foreign actors, sharing information which was not in the best interest of the country, wittingly, willfully doing so, knowing exactly who they were dealing with. I mean, this is remarkable. The federal government isn't going to share any of the names, and we don't know what investigations will take place after this. Of course, and then what happens is people's minds go right down their own political ideological road. So it'll be some corners will say, well, it's got to be all Liberals involved, or it's got to be all Tories involved, or it's got to be all NDPers involved. We don't know. And it would be helpful to know, especially before we go to the polls again, because there's got to be people held to account here. Just think about it, and I said off the top, and I'll stick with it, is a lot of people throw around words like treason pretty willy-nilly. Things that they don't like, treason. But on this front, this is actually inside the epitome of the definition. Working wittingly, directly, with foreign operatives and or their proxies, sharing information detrimental to our democracy, to our elections, and to the country at large, is right in that crosshairs. So that story is huge, and I'm going to keep having a look around to see what can be done about that. But for sure, if there are names that have been put forward by NSICOP, which is a committee of parliamentarians looking at these issues, is every single one of those names has to be fully investigated. And now maybe people don't have faith in the RCMP, but I don't know who else we can charge with these investigations, but it has to happen. And if anybody has actually done what's being accused, then there has got to be extremely stiff penalty to pay here. And I don't know why anybody from any political stripe would think otherwise. In addition to that, the Auditor General talking about the fact that the country is ill-equipped to deal with cybercrime. Again, I mean, we see the stories. And apparently there's a hospital in Ontario that's been hacked as recently as today. And what the outcome there is going to be, I don't know. But if we're not prepared for cybercrime, and the number that was used is that there's only about 5 to 10% of these cybercrimes are reported. Talk about instances of fraud. In 2022, over $500 million was lost due to these fraudulent activities. So that's a number that's pretty sizable, especially if that only represents upwards of 10% of the cyber crimes committed. So let's see if those stories can get some traction if you're so inclined. I think it's two pretty important ones. Also, there's lots of concerns with public sector unions. Talk about the fact that they're going to now be required, their workers are going to be required to be in the office at least 3 days per week versus 2 days a week. Now, of course, the concern is that there was no consultation leading in, and couple that with the fact that the government themselves have said that they're trying to offload a lot of the commercial real estate that they have. So if there's not office space conducive to having more people in the office more frequently, then that's obviously a problem that government has created for themselves. But I think by and large, the general public don't see a problem with people being told that they have to work 3 days a week at the office. We are talking about productivity. We are talking about efficiency. That said, interesting report coming from Stats Canada regarding teleworking, which was basically what people were doing. Now, I know people working in the private sector who basically are never going to go back to the 5 days a week, 8 or 10 hours a day in the office. It's a hybrid model that they're using. But here's some of the numbers Stats Canada is using. In 2022, teleworkers saved on average 64 minutes of commuting time per day. So what they looked at is how people use those time that they spared with the commute. Sleep, on average, they're reporting throughout this survey, 23 extra minutes of sleep. Not a bad thing. 9 extra minutes dealing with meals and breaks, 16 minutes of household chores, and of course when you're working you're supposed to be working, not cleaning up the living room. Activity and passive leisure, an increase in that front as well. Then they looked about the time that teleworking parents were able to spend with their children versus being on the highway or the byway going to and from work. Let's see here, teleworkers on the mother's side were able to spend 324 additional minutes with their children or caring for other loved ones, versus the non-teleworkers, 253 minutes. For the fathers, 272 additional minutes versus non-teleworkers, 201. So there's an argument to be made. And I'll throw this back out there because it gets me in hot water every single time, and not to giggle at the fact that I get myself in trouble. But every time we bring up the concept of like even a 4-day work week, which it can't work for every sector, it can't work for this industry, for instance. I mean, we're here 24/7, 365. So it doesn't work for my industry, but it does for others. And people scoff at it. I mean, how can we pay people full time to work less? The fact of the matter is, you can look around yourself just by having a search through Google about how it's worked for companies that have given it a shot. And by and large, it has worked famously. It's been really popular, obviously, amongst employees, but for employers, like Microsoft, for instance, took it on somewhere in Southeast Asia. I can't remember, maybe Taiwan. And they said that it worked for the company. Their productivity levels went up, revenues went up, profits went up. So if it's going to be better for employees, which of course it would be, I mean, wouldn't it be nice to have a 3-day weekend every single weekend? But it's worked for the companies. And it's benefited them not just on the bottom line with revenue and profit. They saw less staff turnover, which of course comes with an enormous expense for corporations, big and small, because retraining dollars costs. And the days that you're training are not days that you're actually being productive. So they saw less turnover, which is a good thing. All right, let's check in on the Twitter box before we say goodbye for the day. We're a VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Some people chiming in about the fact that they've had a look at the WestJet move from basic fare to ultra basic fare, which comes with not great circumstances. Not allowed to have a carry-on unless you're traveling transatlantic or trans-Pacific. You board last. You get no assigned seats to be able to ensure you get to sit with the folks you're traveling with. And then you don't get any WestJet rewards, so like WestJet dollars, what have you. So, again, the way travel used to be quite luxurious. You see some pictures of people traveling on aircraft in the 50s and 60s, and there'd be someone coming down the aisle with a big chunk of prime rib, carve it up right there for you, as opposed to the dry pack of pretzels, and that's as good as it gets, and the little thimble full of soft drink is what's being offered. Anyway, you want to take that on, we can talk about it tomorrow. All right, good show today. Big thanks to everyone who supports the program, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer David Williams, I'm your host Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you want to get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.